Hey there, Mark.
Hey, bud.
When was the last time you saw a boring presentation?
Oh, man. It happens way too frequently, quite honestly. It happens way too
Oh,
frequently.
I went to a TEDx event. I was underwhelmed with many of the speakers. Some of them were good, but I just sat yesterday with someone over coffee who's putting together a presentation for his company. To the shareholders, and it just reminded me that, okay, there's some things people need to know, and we say there's at least 3 reasons why.
Anyone can give a presentation. Few deliver unforgettable presentations. What's the difference? You're about to find out. Welcome to the Unforgettable Presentations Podcasts with your hosts, world champion speakers and coaches Mark Brown.
Your life tells a story, and there's someone out there who needs to hear it.
And Darren LaCroix.
Stage time, stage time, stage time.
Ready for some powerful presentation ahas? Let's dive right in.
Mark Brown, you look good.
I didn't powder my nose, though. I got to get the shine off my nose next time.
That's yes. Well, there's that. But sometimes we focus on we didn't powder our nose and we think that's the issue. One of the big reasons why presentations are boring are much more, let's say, crucial or devastating than powdering your nose.
Indeed.
I sat down with this client/student and just looking at what he was trying to get across. And I just walked him through the Fripp speech model. So let's just say the number one reason why is that a presentation needs to be built on a world-class structure.
Amen.
If you've heard us talk before, and we've done podcasts about each of these, but really felt it was critical now to just say, hey, here's 3 things we see all the time. It just pains me. But when the fact that he was open to coaching, he was open to getting that advice. He invited me to coffee because I offered it to him since he had just joined Stage Time, and he's local here in Vegas. And we sat down, we talked about it. And I was just like, look, what are the 3 ideas they need to get? And the challenge he has with his presentation is he has salespeople who need to get it. He has developers, it's a software company, web developers who need to get it. So you have different people in your audience. And Mark, one of the things that I suggested, because he had just gone through Train the Trainer, is use those name tags we have that has a name in the front, but on the back, it has the people representing different parts of your audience, different mindsets that come to your audience. And there's the veteran who's been around longer than you and knows more than you, the person who needs the source material. We've done podcasts on even the audience, the cheerleader who is so excited. They're going to post pictures of you on social media before you're even done, and yet they're not going to do anything. Then there's the curmudgeon, prove it. And what all of them need, and what you need as a presenter, is that structure. That structure, as we say, Mark, that structure gives you confidence, but it gives your audience clarity. And we were sitting down there, we were over at Starbucks here in Vegas, and when we were talking about it, I realized the importance of this. It was reconfirmed, Mark. And that's why we wrote the book. That's why we have Stage Time, is to give people that process to follow, that structure. And I realized, had I not focused him in on that, he would have worked really hard and wasted a lot of time trying to put together a presentation without first saying, okay, what are we trying to say? What's your premise? What are your points of wisdom? What's your opening? What's your closing? And during the conversation, some ideas that he had, one popped right into the opening spot and one right into the closing spot. But without the conversation, they might have not been in the right place.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Darren, about him having to try to meet the needs of different audience demographics. What I often find, and you've also found the same thing, many times presenters have so much material. They want to give the audience everything that they know in 45 minutes. How do you take 25 years of experience and condense that down to 45 minutes? Well, you don't. You have to be selective about what you will share with that audience to begin with, and then decide, okay, I'm going to share this much material. How do I then make sure it flows properly so they follow my train of thought? Because if we're going to be honest, you mentioned boring presentations. Not only are they boring, they can be disjointed if you try to give the audience everything you know at random. Oh, by the way, as I mentioned that, also mention this. And you get totally lost because you're not condensing everything. You have not placed everything properly within a structure and framework that gives you the freedom to deliver the material you wish in a way that's easy to follow. And there's one more thought to consider. Darren, you mentioned different ideas, different personalities, different trains of thought. Sometimes, if we keep it simple and make sure that we structure our presentation so it flows logically, it's that much easier for anyone to follow, even the one who's super excited or the one who's super analytical. A structure provides clarity for all of them. It basically levels the playing field.
Yeah, as we coach, 99% of what we're helping people with is clarity, clarity, clarity. You and I are doing an event coming up beginning of December called Unforgettable Presentations, where we walk people through the process. But going back to why it's boring, it's the fact that there is no structure, or the structure is too loose to give clarity to both the new person, the experienced person, the analytical person, the cheerleader. Right. They need to be on the same page. They'll give you a little grace. And the irony is, Mark, I know the reason people don't do it is A, they're unaware of a world-class structure and how to use it. And B, they don't want to waste time. It takes a little time, but it takes a lot more time if you don't have a process to follow. So the exact reason why people don't want to do that and go through our 7-step process is the exact reason they're boring, because they wasted so much time. They think they're saving time. But if the effectiveness of your presentation, compellingness of your presentation is important, that's why we have the process. That's why we have the structure. And it allows you such grace. If we know where you're at and what you're talking about, it allows you to go off on a tangent and then come back. It allows you to take a rogue question and come back.
To know where you're going. And it's interesting, Darren, you mentioned about time, and you're so right. I don't want to spend time doing all of that. I'll just do this. If we think of the word time, not so much as being wasted, but invested in the right process. A shorter investment of time in a proper structure will save you a lot of wasted time going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So think of it as investing time to use a good structure that works not only once, but will work forever, than trying to haphazardly pop this in. I'm going to pull that in, I'm going to pull that in, and you can literally waste time. And the sad part is, Darren, in the end, most often that does end up being ineffective, boring, or disjointed. Now, I'm not saying it always will be. There are individuals who somehow pull it together and it works for them. That's great. But by and large, as a general rule, as a principle, it's wiser to use a proven world-class structure that you know will pretty much work every time.
Yeah, Mark, I still go back to that workshop you and I did, the live workshop, and you had the young man who was eager and excited, and he had so much to say, and he was passionate about it. And for those of you listening, you'll just have to work with the
visualize this,
the atmosphere, the visualization I'm getting. If you're watching this, Mark grabbed his hand. Mark grabbed his hand up in front of the audience and started walking him around the room, all the way around the room behind the audience. And halfway through, the young man is like, "Where are we going?" Exactly. Exactly. We need to know where we're going.
That was spontaneous too, by the way. I had never done that since, believe it or not. But it was so glaring at the time because his presentation lacked a structure. He was literally taking us down the garden path, out to the street, down to the corner, back with no clear destination in mind, in the minds of the audience. Now, he knew where he wanted to go. But because he lacked a structure, he took us along this labyrinthine maze of a pathway. Have you ever been to a corn maze at Thanksgiving time, Halloween time? You are in this maze, and eventually you want to get to the center or get your way back out. Eventually you'll find your way there, but there's no roadmap. There is no structure. And very often, and please hear my heart with this, friends, we think we know how to get where we're going. We know what we want to end up with, and we think the path is clear. But if the path is not clear and the structure is not obvious, very quickly, people begin to lean back, begin to check out, begin to grab their device, and they have no clue where you're going. And they'll say, wait me when you get there. And they've missed the point completely. It may sound a bit facetious, but please understand, we have not only the ability, but the responsibility to give our audiences the best that we have. And with a well put together world-class structure, we can take them on a journey where not only does the destination matter, but the journey itself matters. Your process, your steps, all the wisdom you give to them along the way, they'll get it. It'll not be just about the end of the presentation. It's the experience that you and I can give the audience when we use a world-class structure.
So look, if you don't know what we're talking about, check out our book. You can get it as a Kindle book. You can buy a physical copy, deliver unforgettable presentations. If you are open to the idea of having a world-class structure to follow, check out Stage Time University. It's one of the programs we give you, Create Your Keynote by Next Week, an audio form, which is exactly the book. The book was designed from that, developed from that. And Mark, I just think people try and save time. We have a large client that we're talking to where they realize their upper level management and their staff, there's some people who are really good at presentations and they notice the gap. The gap. There's other people who, just because you can put together a slide deck, which slide deck that we got to do a whole episode just on that.
We should.
Just because you can put together a slide deck doesn't mean you're a good presenter. Just because you know the answers or you know what people need doesn't mean you can put it together that way. So we're talking to them about getting everybody on the same page with our process. And all right, so number one reason it's not developed on a proven world-class process, proven world-class structure. That's reason number one. If we can follow you, we'll forgive it if there's some boring spots. But if we can't follow you, we're crossing our arms and checking out. Reason number two, the stories are boring. The stories are boring. The stories are heartbeats of presentations. They are the compelling, the opportunity to feel a connection, to create that connection with the audience. Stories are important. Stories are important. Again, the heartbeat. But if the stories are boring, the presentation's boring. And so we see people who they don't know where to find stories. They have them in their life. Everyone has them in their life. And you and I have talked about this
on at length.
We have stories about stories about stories. But we need to remind you. We need to remind you that, look, you have stories. And Mark, I just did the Find the Funny workshop with Chris McGuire. And we developed a new program, a new exercise, during it, where he had talked about let's just say a TV icon that he works with. I won't mention names. And he literally bullet pointed her life. So the end of day one, I was like, hey, you know what? We should have everyone bullet point their life. So it's like a story file, but it's just the bullet points of events that happened in your life. And then Chris brilliantly said, hey, at the top of that, just jot down the important people in your life. Because if they're important people, chances are there's many stories connected to that. So bullet point your life. And do it chronologically and then just keep adding to it. It's never done. And we encourage people to, as Mark taught me, look at your phone, pull out your phone, pull out the camera roll and take a look. There's probably stories from this week that you didn't even think of, oh, that could be a story.
There it is.
Mark, I was at our friend Eden's house. You know Eden and Tony.
Yes.
Pseudo.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And so
absolutely. Yeah.
I was sitting on the couch. I don't have a dog. I love dogs. And the dog came up to me and just as I was sitting there and just put his head over me. And I was like, I melted. The dog curled up.
Look at that.
So I was just like, aw. So I took a picture. Well, there's a story about that. There could be a story about that. There could be many stories. Remember, though, as presenters, the idea for story is to elicit emotion to deliver a message. Elicit emotion to deliver a message. If we were just entertaining, stand-up comedians or entertainers, okay, well, that's a different outcome. That's a different intention. They can just be entertaining. There doesn't have to be a point. But for you and I as presenters, again, the heartbeat of a presentation is the story. And you have them. And Mark, this is almost like reason 1.0 is actually part of reason 2, is they don't structure their stories.
Structure again. Comes back. Look at that.
Their stories don't have a structure. They don't have a transformation of the character. They don't have the aha moment, or they skip right over the transformation. Mark, we even quizzed people who are in our workshop, and I said, hey, in my ouch speech, because they've all studied that and heard that, I said, in my ouch speech, how do you know the character's transformed? Now, it isn't intended to be a memorable part of the story. However, it needs to be shown. And nobody could come up with it, not even Chris. And I said, look, that's okay, but it was in there. And we talked about the fact that I said, here I wanted to be a comedian. I had no talent. I was not funny. I had no reason being on stage. I'd never been on stage before. So how do you know the character changed? So it's a little line at the end, but it's essential to the structure to make the whole story work. And it's the fact that now in a comedy club, my picture hangs on the wall.
Yeah.
So I went from wanting to be a comedian, walking in the door, never done it before, dared by Brian Tracy, to having my picture in a comedy club on the wall. So it's something like that. But if, again, you need to understand the structure of a story with the intention of delivering a message.
And the cool thing is, you said structure. Now, don't be confused now. We mentioned the structure of a presentation, but within one of the components, stories, a well-structured story will also elicit emotion, but deliver the message behind the story. Stories aren't meant to be just randomly, and they can be used to entertain. But why not entertain, but also leave a message with your story?
Yeah, and we also had someone who was taking the workshop with us, and she was doing a TEDx audition. And we were working with her, and one of the things that we saw that was missing was a foundational phrase. So part of the unforgettable story is a foundational phrase, which becomes that sticky phrase that your audience remembers 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months after. Mark, you remember the story of when I was working with a Wells Fargo executive.
Yes.
Well, I should say I was sharing the stage. I didn't teach her this, but it was the first time in the corporate world I saw someone do this, and it was brilliant. And she was out pitching credit card services to big companies, huge companies. And she used a thread in the foundational phrase, we could either win together or lose alone. We could either win together or lose alone. And after you heard that 3 or 4 times, guess what? They want to be on our team. They want to work with us. They have seen this before. They know this. But It's encapsulated so that they go back to their board meeting and in their head, they're remembering that foundational phrase. So for us, that's a critical part of the story that delivers the foundational phrase. So number one, structure of the presentation. Number two, unforgettable stories, including knowing the structure. I didn't know the structure when I met you, Mark. I thought I was good. I've been doing this for years. And Dave Fitzgerald said, take the stories you have and make them so good, someone will pay to hear them. That was a huge aha. But I didn't know how. I didn't have a process. I didn't have a structure to hold it up against, which again is why we have stage time to teach that. Stage time is something I wish I had early on. It would have saved me years of frustration and struggle.
And I appreciate that, Darren. Thanks for the kind words. But you mentioned the foundational phrase. One last thought on that. Foundational phrases are what companies use in their ad slogans. They use a phrase you remember, as you said, that sticky phrase that reminds them of the product. And if there can be a sticky phrase that reminds the audience of you and your message, then by all means use that. And please understand, working on a story may sound like, I gotta do that, work on a story. I've told this little anecdote before, but I remember going to a National Speakers Association convention, sitting in the dining hall one day and watching, I was at a large circular table and watching a speaker working on a story with his mentor. The speaker is Otis Williams Jr., who is Toastmasters 1993 world champion in public speaking. You may not know his name. It was 31 years ago. I have a recording. But his mentor, who was helping him, was Les Brown. And I was sitting there with Les Brown, Willie Jolly, legends of the speaking business, and Otis, and watching them work on a story to improve it, to make it better, to structure it so it had an emotional connection and also was able to accomplish the objective of supporting the premise of the presentation and having an impact on the audience. And do not take lightly the time we need to invest. Here's the idea again, investing that time to make sure our stories are effective. Yes, they can be simply entertaining, and we can do that too. But why not have the story be more effective and impactful if you can, which means working on it. And point three, we'll come back to this on point three, Darren, by the way, but working on it to make sure it's tight, it's effective, and as Dave said, make it better. I think you could probably help me with this, Darren. I've mentioned it before, but I can't help going back to a comment that famous comedian Jerry Seinfeld made once about the time he invests to make sure his lines are tight and clean. Do you recall what he said, or the essence of what he said?
I remember Patricia Fripp talking about it, and I'm paraphrasing here, but
Sure.
He said something, don't hold me true on the numbers, but something to the effect of he'll take 8 hours to take a 9-word joke and make it a 6-word joke. I don't know if those are the exact numbers, but the critical truth is he'll work really hard. Now, his job as a comedian is to get the punchlines closer together and funnier. Our job as speakers is to deliver that message. Now, to wrap up stories, keep in mind, too, that not every story has to have a deep message.
Correct.
There should be a point to it. Now, the opening story could just be to open our minds to connect us to the problem. So there might be not a foundational phrase to every single story. Please don't get us wrong. Don't literally do that for everything, but understand why it is. Could also be the ending story to recap the whole point, or to reinforce, or we call back to a foundational phrase from earlier. So the opening story could just be to create that connection between yourself, the audience, and the message, or the reason for the presentation, the premise, we call it.
But don't discount the fact that it does take work, an investment of time to get the story to where it needs to be. As Dave told Darren, make the story so good, people will pay for you to hear it from you. In the same way, work towards making our stories so good so the impact is more effective wherever that story fits in your presentation.
All right, let's go to number three. Number three is the power of qualified feedback. The reason why it's boring is that people don't get the feedback from a qualified source. Most of them don't even get feedback, period, or they don't want to hear it. Look, if I'm going to be blunt, ego is the biggest problem. Laziness and ego are the biggest problems in the presentation world. They don't want to take the time. They don't want to follow a process, or they already think they know it. They're good enough just because they can stand there with confidence and deliver a boring presentation. It's still boring.
And it's funny. I said earlier, I wanted to get back to that lunchtime session, I guess you will, at the NSA convention. And I realized here was Otis Williams Jr., who was a world champion speaker, but he was looking for help from Les Brown. If you don't know who Les Brown is, look him up. He's a living legend, a keynoter, top rank. I think he was a keynoter at the most recent National Speakers Association Influence Convention earlier this year. But Les is a walking, breathing, living legend in the industry. And Otis went to him. He had access to him, but he chose to go to Les because he realized here's someone who is qualified to help me take this story to the next level. Why do I say that? Am I saying you must always find a world-renowned top celebrity to quote coach you? No, we're saying who is really qualified to help you to make sure your presentation is structured well, has the right components, and it can be improved with tweaks that you want to make. I often say this, Darren, and I know I can get myself in trouble, but I'll say it anyway. If we do go to someone for help, very often we go to someone who we think is better qualified because they've been on the planet longer than we have, and therefore they should know. But I always offer this caution. This does not apply to everyone, but let's be aware. Sometimes we'll approach someone and they'll tell you, oh, you should do something, but they're telling it to you based on what they would do if they were you. So think about what qualified feedback should look like for you.
Yeah. It breaks my heart. When I was having coffee, we were talking about a sermon we had both witnessed recently, and he said, I'm curious, what do you think could have made it better? And I stopped and thought, because I didn't have my coaching hat on when I was sitting there watching, but when I stepped back and said, okay, what's the main point of the message? I realized there was a great visual up front, but it was a visual of, and it was a great twist. It was a great twist. Oh, that's what it got. That's what he meant. That's great. It was a brilliant twist. But the point that he was trying to make was much deeper. And there was no visual or illustration about the depth of what he was trying to say. It was a great sermon, don't get me wrong. And then the end of it was just strong, passionate, clear, but too long. It was like too much of a percentage of it. Now, I say this because a lot of people, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't put this on Mark, but I think there's two kind of presenters. Number one, those who don't see the value in a coach, those who see the value in a coach. And number two, those who'll never, ever reach their full potential. Those who see the value in a coach and those who will never, ever reach their full potential. The challenge is, the reason is, if you're not getting feedbacks from somebody who can look at what you said and how you said it, what your persona is and what you were trying to get across, we're going to work really hard in the wrong direction. We're going to be passionate, but we're not going to have the impact that we could have if we had help, if we had that insight. I can't emphasize that enough.
Well, I got to tell you, friends, Darren does sound passionate. And I want to be clear on one thing. He's not just saying that from his lofty position as a world champion in CSP, because he'll be the first to tell you, Darren tried to DIY it for a long time. He was the do-it-yourself king. And when he approached me, I was humbly grateful he would ask me for help. But there were times we had, shall we say, very animated conversations about what he did with the advice I offered him. And we can laugh about it. Now, we're being honest here. I realized years ago, I needed help and I got it when I could. And Darren, you were Mr. DIY for a long time.
Oh,
So-
I didn't want the help. I've been doing this for years. I do stand-up comedy. Granted, I wasn't a headliner, but my ego was in my way. So I say this from the guy who was there, who did not see the importance of that feedback. I just honestly, when I got help from Mark, I wanted him to pat me on my head and tell me how great he was. I wanted confirmation. I didn't actually want the feedback.
Ooh, wow. I'm going to pause, Darren. You hit me really hard just now. I wanted confirmation, not feedback. And we need to create a phrase from that. You know, do you want confirmation or do you want education? Right? Do you want to learn or you simply want to be coddled? Woof. Seek education, not we'll write that down. Seek education, not confirmation. But that's being very honest and open. I really appreciate that, Darren. I'd never heard you say that before. And we're being honest here, friends. We're being open. We're doing this live. We're just recording it without rehearsing it. And when he says, I was 3 times today, he mentioned his ego. And it makes me think sometimes we find individuals who work with us whose ego does get in the way. And I've had clients who have come to me from a foreign country and come to the USA and said, I'm going to come to America. I said, don't come. They came anyway. And they met with me. I said, okay, I make these 3 recommendations. And time came for the presentation and they went on stage and did what they did before they came to work with me. And they wondered why they did not do better than they thought they did. And if you're seeking validation and confirmation, that's fine. But if you really want to learn, be willing to invest the time and the effort to consult with someone who is qualified to give you the feedback, the support, the encouragement, and the recommendations that you need to move forward, and then be willing to accept it. That's the most important piece. Darren?
Yeah. This is so important. So important. You got to get feedback from someone who's been there. If you want to reach your full potential, it's a choice. And Mark, I don't know that I would say coddled. I don't think that's the right word. I didn't need the nurturing. I wanted, as I think Craig has a foundation. People come for validation, not education.
Right.
That's a Craigism.
Okay.
I want to honor that, but I wanted the fact that you were impressed by me. So I wanted the validation, not, help me, poor little old me, tell me I'm great. I wanted you to, with confidence, say, that's amazing. Just change the to is in your goal.
That's right. He said he wants some small tweaks, right? Yeah. And you said ego a couple of times today, Darren, and just thinking about this, I wonder how many times our ego might prevent us from getting the help that we could really transform the level of what we provide. But it's not just about our ego. Here's what's on my heart, friends. And this may sound almost arrogant, but I think sometimes we think we are better than we are. And sometimes that happens because around us, there may not always be levels of excellence that we can strive for. And again, I say this not arrogantly because trust me, I began my journey in speaking 30 years ago, and I was overwhelmed when I saw the people around me who were great speakers. And I did my best. I worked hard without that much help. In Toastmasters, I got to the World Championships by accident. I don't know how I got there. I really don't. I didn't have any real coaching and direction, and I was doing so many things poorly. And when I did not win, I was like, that's fine. I'll try again. But it all flipped for me when I met David Brooks, who approached me and said, I see potential there. If you'd like, I'll help you. And literally, I surrendered myself to his direction. I asked several questions, and in his brilliance, he helped me to learn to answer questions myself. He helped me to learn to think for myself, to assess why I'm doing things and why I'm making decisions. And over the course of 1 year with his guidance, I was able to see more clearly what I was completely oblivious to the year before. The difference was I was yielding to his leadership because I understood he was where I wanted to be. And to this day, I still submit myself to the wisdom of my mentor, like David Brooks and others like Patricia Fripp and Willie Jolly, because I know I can learn from them. Yes, we have credentials, but when I stop learning, I stop living. Darren.
Well, I hope this makes sense to you listening. And this is the reason that I created Stage Time University the way I did. Because I remember where I was financially back in the 90s. And I said, how can I create a place that people can get the process to follow and then the world-class feedback that they need to truly make this impactful? I mean, just working with people and showing them, we had our friend Albert was going through the workshop, and we took one of his characters and we just made the character more vibrant, made the whole story more vibrant. Now, if I was Albert, I would have brought the same thing to the workshop. Like, I remember where I was. And even now, I still need that reminder. Even now, I still get coaching because I know the value of it. My ego was definitely involved back then. And once in a while, it still rears its little head. But Stage Time was designed as a place to get the process and to get the feedback. I get told again and again, I need to raise the prices. I need to raise the prices of membership. And I fight it. So look, if you're interested in getting some help in this area, even if you don't think you need it, maybe you don't. But if you want to get to that next level, please check out Stage Time University. We love what we do. We love working together. And Mark, I found the power of duo coaching, which I don't know that we coined the term, but we kind of clarified how we do it and what we do. Chris and I did some duo coaching after the event for this person who was working on a TEDx speech. And I won't even coach by myself again, because it's so much more powerful getting two perspectives. You confirm some things together, and then you give ideas and insights that the other person didn't see, which is why we have two coaches on every Wednesday call. Mark?
Yeah, and please bear in mind, I had experience recently that kind of took me by surprise. I've been coaching for a long time, and someone approached me and said they were reluctant to approach me because they had heard through a third party that coaches like us, Darren and me, world champions, Toastmasters, and so on, professional coaches, will take your speech, they'll rip it apart and tell you to change the whole thing, and it will be different. I have no idea where that came from, but I will tell you, and please feel free to vet us, check us out, find out what we've done, check out Stage Time, talk to our, look at our testimonials. Our goal is not to go and change your speech. We really want to help you find the best you that's there, bring out the best of you, and maybe point you in a direction, or at least identify for you areas in the presentation that you maybe weren't aware of. Darren LaCroix has proclaimed all over the world. He took his first script to me and he wanted to say how good it was. But Darren, something you said, I have not forgotten. You said Mark Brown could see in 2 minutes what I couldn't see after 7 years. So please understand, our goal is to help you see what you may not see. Darren says, fill in the holes in the Swiss cheese that we can fill for you. Let us help you and serve you. And if not us, get someone who is qualified to help you. But I tell you what, Stage Time, you'd be hard pressed to find a program like this anywhere in the world.
All right. Hey, thanks for being with us. And Mark, we have an interesting guest coming up. And let's just say he's not boarding.
Oh my gosh. Oh, he's not boring.
Yeah, he's not boarding. This was an experience that I was in firsthand, and it was awesome. But we're going to go and dissect something that we've never really talked about. This is an unforgettable illustration. So we've never talked about this kind of illustration, but also how it's the process. Mark, I'm excited to hear the process. Like, how did he pull this off with 1,000 people?
Exactly.
Like, that's amazing. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening. Check out Stage Time. Remember, number one, it's got to be in a world-class. If you don't want to be bored, big mistakes that we see. Reason why. It's not on a world-class structure that allows the audience to observe it. Stories, you have them, you have more than you think you do. You're sitting on some that have been in you for years that you can uncover yourself. And number three, it's get that feedback that you need. Look, if you go to the pros, just like Otis Williams Jr., you go to people who are, even if it's people at your level, that's okay too. It doesn't have to be Mark or me. If you want to work with duo coaching or Mark and me, you can check out Stage Time for sure, or go to getaspeakingcoach.com. But find that person that you trust, that you will be open to help you be
Unforgettable. See you next week.
Hey there, this is Darren LaCroix. Thanks for checking out this podcast episode on YouTube. If you want all of them, not every one is on YouTube, check out your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode. Keep being a sponge so you can be unforgettable.
Check out StagetimeUniversity.com, where good presenters become unforgettable.